Hello my lovely, Sarah Jane Critchley here, author of A Different Joy, The Parent's Guide to Living Better with Autism, ADHD, Dyslexia and more. Now today I want to talk to you about consent and about different parenting styles. And this is absolutely vital if we're thinking in terms of the sex education of our young people, in terms of helping them to manage relationships and in terms of managing their vulnerability. Because one of the things that makes our young people so very vulnerable is not knowing that it is okay to say no and in what contexts they have control over their own bodies. So let me just tell you a story of two different parents whose experience I've come across in the last week or two. So parent number one was a parent who both parents have children who don't speak, who are pre-verbal. Both parents have children who are autistic. The first parent has written in a book about how they took their child to a theatre because they wanted them to have this experience. The theatre was to go and see one of the Muppets, a character that they quite liked, but they got very anxious outside the theatre, and the parent literally dragged that young person in, clamped their legs around them and forced them to stay in the theatre in a place they were incredibly uncomfortable, and it provoked a huge brouhaha over Twitter because the way that parent was treated was really harsh, but the way that they were treating their young person, in my view, was equally incredibly harsh. And what that says to that young person is that they do not have the right to control where their body is and to say where they need to be if they do not feel unsafe and they're having a panic attack and they're really anxious. And bear in mind, this is a young person who cannot express themselves in words, who cannot say, no, I'm not willing to do that. The only way they can do that is through their actions and through their body and through their behaviour. Parent number two, another pre-verbal young person. Parent number two moved house and went and noticed that when they moved house, their young person went into the sitting room, and within minutes, within 30 seconds or so, they looked as if the way that they looked when they were swimming and were out of their depth. So their body language, the way that they behaved, was the same way that they behave when they think they are drowning. They looked at the carpet in the room, and the carpet in the room was highly patterned. It's one of those Victorian, very geometric things. And they watched that young person's behaviour. They interpreted what it meant, changed the carpet. The young person's now happy and content to be in that room and to lie on it and to be part of family activities in that context. Now, if you look at those two things, both parents had the right to help support the young person the way that they see best. However, one of those was around forcing and compulsion and drilling somebody into dealing with something they're incredibly uncomfortable with, and the other was around observing and supporting and removing barriers to enable the young person to participate. And I have to ask you, which do you think is more appropriate? I know my view, and the reason I feel that the second parent had it absolutely right is because when I look at our young people who are incredibly vulnerable in relationships, one of the issues we have is that all of a sudden, when they become adult, we expect them to know when they have the right to say yes and when they have the right to say no. And yet, if you tell a young person, oh, you've got to go and kiss Auntie Gina, when they don't want to kiss Auntie Gina, or they've got to be hugged by Uncle Bill, if they can't bear Uncle Bill and they don't want to be touched, if you tell somebody that they have to do that they have to allow people into their physical space to lay hands on their body, to force them to do something they do not want to do, when that young person becomes adult and is older, they will automatically have been trained into believing that other people have the control over their bodies and they do not. If they do not have control over their own bodies, they cannot give consent to a beautiful consensual relationship. And that is something I think we should be aiming for, potentially, for anybody to do. We should not have the right to remove that from somebody. So that's your thought for today. Teaching consent, really, really important. There are some amazing resources around from charities such as MenCap. They've done some really nice things on sex and relationships. I'll probably do another film on sex and relationships in more detail later. But that's a really good place to start. And it's around enabling people to have choice. We've got to build those choice building skills, and we have to stop compelling people to do things if they are really, really uncomfortable to do that and they need another way of being. Anyway, hope you have a really wonderful week. I've been Sarah Jane Critchley. If you haven't come to this through my website, through the Different Joy Club, go over to www.differentjoy.com/ADJ Club and sign up today. I hope you've enjoyed that. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye.